Peter Cooper is the writer for the Telikos Protocol, a science fiction comic project that launched on Kickstarter only to exceed their goal in only 2 days and eventually raise in excess of $50,000. Today, Peter shares some unique insights as to how they did it, what it took to get there, and how to start out as a new project founder launching your own campaign. Peter, thanks for joining us today. So, Peter, can you tell us a little bit about the Telikos Protocol and the story that it's based on?
Well, the Telikos Protocol is a story set in the year 2294. So the world has become barren as a result of complete ecological collapse of the world. It's completely uninhabitable. Humanity has been forced to hide in these subterranean cities in the hope of being able to eke out a few more years of continued existence. At the time that we're seeing the story, we're almost 100 years into that. So this system of cities that they've built are starting to fail. And humanity, reaching the last possibilities that it can reach for, has managed to find a slew of alien technology which they're now trying to use to get off the planet, to try and have a stab at interplanetary colonization. But just as they're reaching the end of that research cycle and they're managing to find their feet and hopefully be able to make it off-world, a first contact event with an alien race occurs and everything kicks off. The second that happens, everything goes to hell, and we follow a couple of beat cops within one of the major cities and a high-profile scientist as they try and get out the city, and then the story continues from there.
So, a lot of people coming onto Kickstarter or wanting to start a Kickstarter, often just finding the idea can even be the roadblock for them. How did you go about coming up with the idea of the Telikos Protocol? Where did it come from?
Well, I was very lucky to meet an artist by the name of Adam Byrne, who is the artist on Telikos Protocol. I actually met him in 2009 working on a film project of mine. He stepped forward to do some concept art, and as it so happened, we absolutely hit it off. Within a year, he had done, as part of his portfolio, a few project pieces, all with a very interlinked style, all very visual, all very cinematic. Big scale action pieces, and the sort of stuff that everyone loves. And those are about, you can see those on the Kickstarter and on his DeviantArt page. And he came to me in 2010 and said, Pete, I haven't really managed to get very far in trying to write this. Would you be willing to write this for me? And naturally, I was absolutely thrilled to get the opportunity. Originally, it was just going to be an art book, essentially, an illustrated storybook to some extent, with primarily art, mostly full page kind of stuff, as opposed to a comic book. But after deliberating over the story and my work on writing that and really fleshing that out, we came to the conclusion that doing it as a comic would probably be much better in terms of big story, as well as offering a lot more opportunity for some very interesting visuals. I've gone out of my way to try and write a story that really gives Adam the opportunity to show all kinds of environments, all kinds of action. So really the comic format really seemed to allow more opportunity for flexing both our muscles, both from a storytelling perspective as well as from an artist's perspective and from his end. So really, it started off as a storybook. It's now gotten much bigger, and as these things do, and that's how we managed to get to this point now.
So, how did it end up coming to the idea to actually turn it into a Kickstarter project?
Well, Kickstarter offers a lot of avenues that a lot of other release patterns don't offer. A lot of people see Kickstarter as the only means of getting funding for printing and everything else. And to some extent, we saw that the same way. We wanted to be able to release our project, but we weren't sure whether or not trickling out a release through through standard means would necessarily get a return fast enough to warrant the costs of printing and everything else. Doing a Kickstarter, and our initial goal of $9,500 was intended to cover the first volume. We never really intended the response to be quite as large or quite as quick as it was. So we were looking at that and going, okay, covering our costs is a primary thing. At the same time, Kickstarter is a great way of being able to engage with a new fan base. You release on Kickstarter, you're immediately plugged into the Kickstarter community, and they're all interested in the same stuff you are. That's why you're releasing something in the comics category or in the tech category, or dance, film. You're releasing something on Kickstarter. You're directly plugging into a pre-existing community that you can then engage with on a personal basis. You release something through a publisher, much more difficult to do that, short of turning up at a convention with a table and trying to sell comics directly. This is some people might use Kickstarter as a storefront. I know that that accusation's been thrown at Penny Arcade recently. That's been a very interesting story. But in a sense, it is. You think about when you're trying to sell books or anything like that. If you're at a convention or if you're at a trade fair or anything like that, you're there with a table, you're engaging with people directly, you're speaking to them, you're making the sales pitch, and with any luck, you're then handing over a book and they're giving you $5, $10, $15. To some extent, when we were approaching it, we didn't see it all that differently. By being able to engage with that community, that would allow us to be able to show exactly what it is we're about. And thankfully, we went about it the right way, and we've had an absolutely phenomenal reaction to what it is we've created.
Absolutely. I think at the time we're recording this, you're more than 3 times over your original goal, and certainly showing no signs of slowing up.
Yeah, I mean, it's 330% now. I think we're at it's $31,407, which
not that we're counting.
Not that we're counting, no. But if you had said to me at the start of the Kickstarter, you're going to come away with over 30 grand, I would have gone, yeah, all right. I was optimistic. I was hoping, well, okay, we'll go for 9,500. It's nice and safe. It's within that 3 to 9, 10 grand kind of box, which everyone, you hear about various people talking about that kind of key area that most of the projects seem to be funded within. So we figured, okay, we'll go in there with any luck. We'll impress. Might go beyond that, might get to 15 grand, maybe. If we do really well, it'll get to 20. Yes, result. So to be at $30,000 and above with 13 days, well, it's 12 days and 23 and a half hours or something, I don't know. But to essentially be there with 2 weeks remaining is absolutely incredible. The thing which makes Telikos Protocol even more unbelievable from my perspective is it's Adam and I's first ever comic. We've never done a comic before in our lives. I've written scripts for film. I've done things like that, but I've never written until Telikos Protocol, I'd never written a comic script. Comics was never my intended destination. But there's so much you can do with comics, and you need no budget, because it's not like a movie where you need to pay for your modelers and pay for all this. If you're doing a comic, all you need is time and Photoshop and a computer that can run it. But you get the idea. It's much more feasible, and I think to some extent that's another thing that's worked in our favor.